Okay, this is Chapter 4, Culture and Religion in Eurasia, North Africa, 500 BCE to 500 CE. And we'll start with China and the search for order. And this is the correct set of video notes for Section 1. In 2009, China celebrated the 2,560th birthday of Confucius, despite communism. And Buddhism, Daoism, and Christianity are also growing rapidly in China, and this is part of an enduring legacy of the second wave civilizations. And here's that image that we talked about before with Confucius and Lao Ji and the Buddha right there. Okay, in the period around 500 BCE, there was a great emergence of durable cultural traditions that have shaped the world ever since. In China, there was Confucius and Lao Ji. In India, the Upanishads that defined Hinduism, and Siddhartha Gautama set Buddhism in motion. In the Middle East, see the development of monotheism, specifically Zoroastrianism in Persia and Judaism in Israel. In Greece, there's the development of rational humanism with Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and others. And they all sought an alternative to polytheism. And I noticed that this should not say south, it should say sought. And that was, they're really looking for a way of placating God through ritual and sacrifice. And they went on a quest for a search of order and meaning in the universe, and to guide humans to personal, moral, or spiritual transformations, especially with the development of compassion. And the questions they posed still trouble and inspire humankind, even as they defined their distinctive cultures. So why did these traditions emerge at about the same time? Well, some historians point to major social changes like Iron Age technology that led to higher productivity and deadlier war. The growth of cities led to an increase in commerce, the emergence of new states and empires, new contacts between civilizations as trade increased, and it's a mystery why particular societies developed the particular answers that they did in their search for order. So let's start with China. So China had a state-building tradition that went back around to 2000 BCE. Right, there's the idea of the mandate of heaven that was established in 1100s BCE upon the foundation of the Zhou dynasty. But when the last dynasty fell, there was a breakdown into total chaos, and it's known as the Age of the Warring States, about 400 BCE to 220 BCE. And first we have the Legalist Answer. Now there were high rewards but high punishments. Han Fei was the leading legalist philosopher, and his principle was strict rules, clearly defined and strictly enforced. That's the answer to disorder. There's a pessimistic view of human nature. Only the state can act in people's long-term interests. And there's a promotion of farmers and soldiers who performed the only essential functions in society: food production and protection. So the advocates of legalism believed that humans were self-serving and short-sighted. Thus, to get them to do good, they had to be sure of high rewards and keep them from doing wrong. They had to fear the heavy punishments. And so legalism really inspired the Qing dynasty as they reunified China. And Shi Huangdi, the first emperor, China's first emperor, he was the one that used legalism to create social order out of the chaos of the Warring States period. And unfortunately, his brutal reign discredited legalism in the eyes of many of his subjects. All right, the Confucian Answer. So, Confucius was an educated, ambitious aristocrat. He spent much of his life looking for a political position to put his ideas into practice. And Confucius' ideas had an enormous impact on China and the rest of Asia. His teachings were collected by students, known as the Analects, and his elaboration and commentary on his ideas by later scholars created Confucianism as a body of thought, or as a philosophy, if you will. Like I said, he came from an aristocratic family. This is in northern China, and believed to have found the way to to create social harmony. And while he sought office where he could put these ideas into effect, he never found such a job, but remained a thinker and a teacher. And so all of those scholars and his pupils collected those teachings and put them together. And this basically formed this new philosophy of Confucianism. Okay, the principle. The moral example of superiors is the answer to disorder. In clear contrast to legalism, Confucianism taught that the strong moral example of social superiors should teach others how to behave. And so society consists of unequal relationships, and that's governed by Ren. Confucius taught that Ren, or the benevolence, the human-heartedness, goodness, should be cultivated in all social relationships. And it was the duty of the superior member to be benevolent and sincere. And that would inspire indifference and obedience from the inferior member. And the Han Dynasty had rejected the Qin use of legalism and used Confucianism as the governing philosophy for the new state bureaucracy. And his government service required an entry test, and that's known as the civil service exam. Confucianism came to dominate the educational system and became central to the world view of civil servants. And as civil servants were embodied with social morality, they enjoyed an esteemed status, while merchants and soldiers were much more lower in the social hierarchy. But humans have the capacity for improvement, and education is the key. They advocated a broad liberal arts education, and the point was to apply the liberal arts education to government problems, right? And this did create a need for rituals and ceremonies. Now, while Confucius was not an atheist and did not deny religion, the philosophy is based on his teachings focused on establishing social harmony in the material world, not religious or spiritual worlds. And as legalism became discredited, Confucianism became the official ideology of the Chinese state. Now, the family was a model for political life, with a focus on filial piety. They defined the role of women as being humble and serving their husbands. And the woman writer Ben Zhao wrote Lessons for Women. And here we see an emergence of gender expectations. Confucianism, like I said, stressed filial piety and loyalty and reverence to one's parents and ancestors. And this loyalty was important in and of itself because it was a model for loyalty to the emperor. So Confucian views of the family were rigidly hierarchical and patriarchic. Female subordination was justified by the belief that the superior world of the heavens was male and the inferior material world of the earth was female. And the Confucian virtues for ideal men contained in the paired concepts of Wen and Wu. And this should be right here. This should be W-E-N, just like it's spelled right below that, right there. The W-E-N is the correct spelling. Wen, W-E-N, refined the qualities of rationality, scholarship, and literary and artistic abilities, while Wu described physical and martial achievements. And Wen was considered superior to Wu. And while Confucius was not necessarily a misogynist, there were still clearly defined roles for these genders under these gender expectations. I'm going to emphasize the great importance of history. The ideal good society was the past, golden age. Superior men had outstanding moral character and intellect. Wasn't just the aristocrats. And they created expectations for government. Emperors to keep the taxes low, give justice, and provide for the material needs of its people. And Confucianism was non-religious in character. It was secular. So there was an emphasis on the practical, focused part of the world. Like I said earlier, it didn't deny the existence of gods or spirits, but the focus was on the educated elite, and it had little to do with the spiritual world. Okay, the Daoist Answer. Okay, so the Daoist Answer, it's associated with legendary philosopher Lao Tzu, about 6th century BCE. And he's the author of Dao De Jing, The Way and Its Powers. Taoism was in many ways the opposite of Confucianism. Education and striving for improvement was considered artificial and useless. And there was an urge in Taoism to withdraw into the world of nature. And so the central concept, Tao, or way of nature, was the underlying principle that governs all natural phenomena. Now, in sharp contrast to Confucian emphasis on social engagement, Lao Tzu taught to leave society, enter nature, appreciate its mysteries, beauty, and truth, and the spontaneous, natural behavior, not rigid education. So, also in sharp contrast to Confucian teachings, like I said, Lao Tzu did not value education, but encouraged people to behave in a spontaneous and natural manner. So there was this disengagement with public life. Lao Tzu spoke of a mysterious force of truth and goodness that surrounded all things. And if one could understand this undefinable force, then one could live a good life. And so this really was the focus of the simple, self-sufficient living. The abandonment of education and active self-improvement. Even though the family was still central, right? It was complementarity and balance between males and females, the sexes, rather than hierarchy. And the elite Chinese regarded Taoism as a complement to Confucianism. Taoism entered the population and sought to tap the power of the way, the Tao, for practical purposes, magic or the quest for immortality. But it also provided the ideology for peasant rebellions, like the yellow turbans, for example. So while we might see many obvious contradictions between Confucianism and Taoism, Chinese elites, like I said, saw a natural complement to each other. And many of the civil servants might have used ideas of social hierarchy to govern during the day and withdraw into nature and art and poetry in the evenings. And that concludes section 1.